This video is made possible by Second Call Defense. Second Call Defense provides immediate, upfront legal protection for a member who is forced to use any legal weapon for self-defense. So protect yourself today with Second Call Defense. I did. You'll find the link in the description. Hi, I'm Joel Persinger, the Gun Guy. Thank you very much for all of your support of GunGuyTV and of me. I am super grateful for everything you do. So please don't stop. Also, I do suggest that you check us out on these alternative locations. Just very recently, YouTube deleted a video simply because I made a comment about something they didn't like, and Vimeo deleted it too. Apparently, I violated their terms of, or something, community guidelines or whatever. So it appears only on alternative platforms, and there they are. And since that happens once in a while, it would be a good idea for you to subscribe to one of those. Obviously, if I say something that they don't like, they will delete me, and then I'll have to point you that direction anyway. And then I've kind of gotten in the habit now, if I know I'm going to say something that YouTube and Vimeo don't like, or Big Tech doesn't like, I will point you, I'll put a little kind of a notice on the big tech platforms like YouTube telling you to meet me over on Rumble or meet me over on BitChute or whatever. So please do go over there and subscribe. You'll find some links in the description. All right, well, you already know that this week has been a crazy week. Good grief. Yesterday, we got Justice Thomas's extraordinarily well-written decision in the New York Rifle and Pistol versus Bruen case, which did some landmark things that really have helped us tremendously as Second Amendment advocates. First of all, it took care of the May issue thing. That's gone. And then it also gave us a tool that we can use as a weapon to defend the Second Amendment from now on, and that is it took away this whole multi-tiered scrutiny oddball system by which judges have decided that the government is always right and the defenders of the Second Amendment are always wrong. They can't do that anymore. Now they have to decide it based upon the text, history, and tradition of the right. And then at the same time, it now shifted the burden away from the Second Amendment supporters having to prove that the law that the government has written and have put into effect is unconstitutional, and instead shifted the burden to the government having to prove through the text, history, and tradition of the right that the law is constitutional, and if they can't meet that particular threshold, then it's considered unconstitutional. So at this point, they can pass laws all they want to, but it's going to be a lot easier, I think, for us to knock them back down again. So all of that is very encouraging. Now, I wanted to find out how that helps us. What does that do for us in the state of California? Because as you know, I am a California resident, and both a California resident and an Arizona resident. Now, how it affects me in Arizona, it really, in many ways, other than the 2A fight, it really doesn't, because Arizona is a constitutional carry state and a Second Amendment sanctuary state. California, on the other hand, well, I don't even need to tell you, California is crazy when it comes to just about everything, and the Second Amendment certainly falls into that category. So I got Rick Travis on the line this morning, and we had an opportunity to talk about this. He was extremely enlightening about not only how it affects California, but the fact that the California Rifle and Pistol Association, Gun Owners of California, and others have been queued up and ready to go, waiting for this decision to land the way we wanted it to. And arguably, it has done exactly that. And so I'm very encouraged to announce to you and for you that the California Rifle and Pistol Association and Gun Owners of California are going on offense. In fact, they already have, and it's only the day after the decision was published. So this should be a very interesting interview for you. I have kind of cut it down quite a bit because we chatted about a lot of things and we rambled about a lot of stuff, so I've tried to keep it as concise for you as possible. And with that said, let's get right to it. This quick interview, I don't know how quick it is, but this quick interview I did with Rick Travis from the California Rifle and Pistol Association. How does this affect us in California?
Well, it affects us in a lot of ways, Joel. I mean, we've talked for a long time about how the Ninth Circuit and the state courts work here in California on several cases at CRPA and other organizations like Sam Paredes and Gun Owners of California and others have put forward. And, we've all talked about certain justices that we adore because they're like, yeah, you're right. And, the California legislature and the governor are wrong. But at the end of the day, it's been a fight, not just over the Second Amendment, but for how the Second Amendment would be adjudicated inside the courts, how they would look at it and say, do we weigh it on, this type of scrutiny, that type of scrutiny? And I mean, literally, I know Chuck Michel's been on your show and he talks about 3 types, but there's some strong arguments. There's like 6 or 7 types because they merge them and flip them all around to justify a moment. And then there's also we went in the Ninth Circuit on a 3-panel, usually 2-1 or 3-0. And then the governor goes and says, no, let's get 11 people on. The attorney general manipulates the system and voila, you end up with cases like we have that will be up for writs of certiorari with the Supreme Court this next session. So it's going to be interesting how they handle those, because they could take a couple of them because they want to make a strong statement like they did in this case, or they may just send them down with this case saying, correct your errors, Ninth Circuit. So that's all in the forecast. So I would say the first thing from a legal standpoint that we're waiting to see is in this fall, we have 4 cases that are up for writs of certiorari, or Satori, I always say that wrong. But anyways, not the lawyer in the group.
It's okay. Everybody knows it just means they're accepting the case.
Right. And that's so they can go 2 ways. They can, like I said, they can accept or turn it back with this. The next big issue for Californians is we have had oftentimes, I would argue, despite some amazing sheriffs that I could name off, we've had a very hard time having access to concealed carry permits, CCWs as they're often called, and we've had a patchwork. I mean, you're down in San Diego County and your process looks draconian, even under the improvements that have been made over the past few years, compared to many of the counties up in the Northern California or central part of the state, where it's basically like, hi, Joel, let's run your drive. Okay, yeah, you haven't, okay, fill out this form, pay a fee, and that person can carry a firearm anywhere in the state that you can with your San Diego. And then, of course, there's places that are much more draconian, still issue kind of, sort of. And so there's been this patchwork that has not made the Second Amendment equal for every Californian that's law-abiding, depending on the county you live in. I mean, I could take my oldest son. He lives maybe 10 miles as the crow flies from me, but he lives in LA County. And while they're kind of issuing, it's a longer process. It costs a lot more money. And he's like, how's this fair? Because like you literally live 10 miles away from me, Dad, and you go through half the stuff that I'm required to go through.
Rick, you mentioned the process and the fact that it's different in each county. First of all, I guess it should be said that just because this decision came down does not mean everything has changed immediately. So I'll ask you to clarify that in just a minute. But California is not just going to lay down and take this, are they? I mean, it seems to me that looking at Gruesome Nuisance's statement yesterday, that he's got like 15 or 16 laws he wants to sign immediately. And then they're looking at writing a law, changing the concealed carry law in the state so that it complies very narrowly with the decision, but makes it much harder to get a permit. Am I reading that incorrectly? Because that's pretty much what I thought he was saying.
Yeah, no, you're not reading that incorrectly at all. As the new legislative director for CRPA, I will tell you, I was in Sacramento up until I came in here to talk to you late last night. So we're talking this morning. Focusing on this particular question, Newsom has asked for a law. I'm sure that I will probably either while we're doing this or shortly thereafter see it come up, because they only have about 6 days to get this done on the timeline, which means they're going to break all sorts of rules. No shock to me at all on this. But a lot of that's coming too because we as the CRPA issued 58 demand letters to all the sheriff's departments. And so that cat's out of the bag saying you need to come into compliance with this. And so, Newsom's going to fight back, but what Newsom is going to do is cost the taxpayers a lot of money, because he's going to have to start cutting checks to pay for legal fees and for our time to sue him. So,
which brings up okay. So I want to be encouraging if I can here.
Yeah.
Because I think yesterday was a day to celebrate and today is a day to celebrate. At the same time, this is I hate to use this word because people can equate it with violence, and that's not what I'm talking about, but this is a war. It's a legal war. It's not a shooting war, but this is a war for the foundation of our country, for the rights under the Bill of Rights. That's what this is. And a war is not won all at once.
No.
If anything, it's won because of many battles that are fought strategically with the goal in mind of reaching the end in which you have utterly defeated your enemy. So what we experienced yesterday was the result of many, many years of strategic legal fighting that culminated in an extremely good win in one major battle. But it's not the end of the war. It was to put it in, to mix my metaphors and put it in boxing parlance, it was a severe uppercut that knocked our enemy back on their heels a little bit, but it was not a knockout punch. So that being the case, they're going to come back and fight again. What I see, and again, I'm not an attorney, so this is something I'll probably talk with Chuck about too when he comes on the show, but I'm sure you know the answer. It seems to me that what the court did, in addition to settling this issue of may issue versus shall issue, was also give us a weapon we could only dream about before yesterday, and that is doing away with the whole scrutiny thing and settling it down to, I forgot how Justice Thomas said it, but I think I've got it here somewhere.
I have it.
Yeah, he quoted it. Would you quote it? Because I think it was nation's history tradition, the national history tradition or something like that.
Yeah, it says, since Heller and McDonald, the Court of Appeals have developed a two-step framework for analyzing Second Amendment challenges that combines history with means and scrutiny. The court rejects that two-part approach of having one step too many. Step one is broadly consistent with Heller, which demands a test rooted in the Second Amendment's text as informed by history. But Heller and McDonald do not support a second step that applies means and scrutiny in the Second Amendment context. Heller's methodology centered on a constitutional text and history. It did not invoke any means and tests such as strict or intermediate scrutiny, and expressly rejected any interest-balancing inquiry akin to immediate scrutiny. And so in
just because of this, he went on and he said, in sum, we reiterate that the standard for applying the Second Amendment is as follows. When the Second Amendment's plain text covers an individual's conduct, the Constitution presumptively protects that conduct. The government must then justify its regulation by demonstrating that it is consistent with the nation's historical tradition of firearms regulation. Only then may a court conclude that the individual's conduct falls outside the Second Amendment's unqualified command. What I got from that is that the burden has shifted.
Yes.
Because it seems to me, and again, like I'm not an attorney, it seems to me like all this time, the burden has been on us to prove that the law that the government has passed is unconstitutional. But now this decision just shifted that burden. The government then has to prove by a historical study, looking at the text and the original meaning of it and the history and the tradition, that the law is valid. And if they cannot meet that threshold, then it isn't.
So one of the points that we brought up was this scrutiny point. And that is so incredibly important that Thomas and the concurring justices pushed that to the side and said, you can't use that. But here is the challenge now. When that balance of responsibility, as you correctly put, moved from us to the government, we, being the Second Amendment community, cannot make the mistake that I talked to you about earlier before this conversation of allowing ourselves to feel like second-class citizens, the redheaded stepchild when it comes to constitutional rights. I mean, we have to realize that the Second Amendment's a right. And one of the things I hear in the Capitol, I hear it in public discourse, and unfortunately, I've seen some of our community go, oh yeah, well, that makes sense, and it doesn't, is the driver's license format in California and the CCW format. And I'm going to expand a little bit to bring it to this ruling. A driver's license, number one, is not a constitutional right. It's a privilege. So all the things attached to that, Joel, schooling, insurance, all these things are for a privilege. When you look to a CCW, one of the best things that I loved was when it said the court has little difficulty concluding also that the plain text of the Second Amendment protects, and Koch and Nash were the two defendants in this case, proposed course of conduct, carrying handguns publicly for self-defense. Nothing in the Second Amendment's text draws a home public distinction with respect to the right to keep and bear arms, and the definition of bear naturally encompasses public carry. So here's what California's progressive anti-gun groups want to say is, oh, well, you guys should have to do everything that you do to drive a car. Hence why we have 3 pieces of legislation that the governor would love to sign in this next week, part of that Sweet 16 package. They're designed to make you and I have insurance if we're carrying, to have insurance if we have a firearm at home, just to have insurance if we own a firearm. I mean, those are 3 different attempts to try to make gun ownership look like a privilege, like a driver's license. So when someone says in front of a group of our people, well, it's the same as it. No, it's got to come out like that. It is not a privilege. It is a right, just like my right to speak to you, my right to choose what kind of religion, my right to tell the government it's wrong. That's a right. It is not a privilege of which I need to have insurance, licenses, Mother May I cards, etc.
Well, to paraphrase Justice Thomas, I don't need to pay a fee and get a government official to approve what I'm about to say on this platform, or in my house, or outside my door, or in the public square, or at the mall, or whatever. I don't need a government official to approve and provide a license and charge me a fee in order for me to go to church or read my Bible. Likewise, I do not need a government official to approve my doing so and charge me a fee and issue a license so that I can have the people who are accusing me come before me in court so that I can face my accusers. The Second Amendment, I agree with you 100%. In fact, if there was something more than 100%, I would have put that number on it. But then people would accuse me of not actually passing my math classes in college. So I won't say that, okay? But the truth is, you're right. I mean, there is no excuse for anybody, any hardworking American citizen, to have to genuflect before an official and pay a fee and get a license in order to exercise an enumerated, constitutionally protected right. And I said enumerated for a reason. It was listed and numbered in the Bill of Rights when the Bill of Rights was originally codified and published in 1791. It's not hard to read.
Right.
The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. That's about as clear as glass. And so I don't know how we get there, but I'm encouraged that it seems to me we've taken a giant step in that direction. But how do we get from now where we are now, where pretty much all of the states are forced to, at minimum, find some shall issue process? Obviously, New York, California, are going to put as many roadblocks in the way as they can. How do we get to that point where the license is no longer needed?
Well, I did like your opening when you talked about that, you're sensitive to the term war. I've called this in the last 48 hours, leading up to it, and today and yesterday, the battleground. And specifically for anybody that studied history, this is our midway. This is where the tide turns in the battle. That decision gives us the ability to start turning around and going after the roster, which we're doing. It gave us the ability to write demand letters to the 58 sheriffs, which have already been sent to them, both through certified mail and email, because we're saying, hey, you have to start complying. And there's already numerous micro battles, as you can imagine, those different counties and board of supervisors developing. And one of the things that this allowed us to do was thoughtfully, this decision looked at all the things that would come out. And that's why this decision is so long, so many people in our community is like, what's taking so long? Because these justices actually learned from Heller and McDonald and said, oh, telling Joel you can't have a cookie until after dinner obviously wasn't clear, because the courts figured out ways that, Joel, you can have a cookie at lunch. You can have a cookie here. You can have a cookie. You can have a cookie, little cookie. You can charge for it. Like, literally taking that metaphor, they just blew it out. And so what they did was they dialed it back and said, we're going to define everything about this. And why that is so important is now, you know, one of the things that they defined in this, and I think a lot of people haven't seen, common use. You know, typical left thing to say to somebody like me that owns a firearm is, oh, so you can have a pistol, Rick, you can have a rifle, you can have a shotgun, you can have an AR-15. Well, why not a hand grenade, a flamethrower, a jet fighter? Like, that is just always where they want to go with the Second Amendment. And they said common use, as in a pistol is common use, an AR-15 is common use, a shotgun is common use. Carrying hand grenades.
May I add very quickly that normal capacity magazines are in common use across this country. I am an Arizona and a California resident, and in Arizona they are everywhere, and nobody in Arizona with half a brain owns a 10-round magazine for their AR.
Right. You know, standard capacity magazines are just that. They're a standard.
Common use.
Right.
Right.
And this is the thing that, as you start to really take this apart, you start to realize they've given us so much ground to take back our rights. And now this is what we're doing. We're going back and taking back our rights. We've said, I know Chuck has said it, Sam and I have said it numerous times on this program, that when this decision came out, if we got what we wanted, the tide of battle would turn. And it is. And so am I surprised? Am I surprised that we have people like Gavin Newsom coming out, throwing a temper tantrum yesterday and saying this is what he's going to do? No, but it shows you what their blind rage is at and how committed they are to taking your firearms away, because they don't care what the costs are going to be of the state. They don't care about people. And I'm going to go a step further, Joel. And I don't mind being the first one to say it. When he comes out and when boards of supervisors start talking about on CCWs, well, we're going to charge higher fees, and we're going to, right off the bat, the first thing that should come out of our side is it's classist and racist. They are so two-faced. I think about it all the time when I go up to Sacramento. Their thing is, Joel, you and Rick don't need a firearm. Because you know why? You live in California. It's the Golden State. You're perfectly safe. Nothing could possibly go wrong. Nothing you could say could ever irritate anybody. Nothing you carry could ever make somebody want to do bodily harm to you. Yeah, this is not my first round in Sacramento. I've been up in there for almost 40 years on different reasons, different things. And I've got to watch the difference just over the last couple of years. We now have the highway patrol on every corner near a legislative and Capitol building. You have them throughout the Capitol Park, all armed. You have them throughout you cannot turn a corner in the old Capitol building without seeing one or two highway patrolmen fully armed. You can't go into new legislative buildings without going through multiple security checks that are kind of ironic to me, because it's like, well, if you've already checked I don't have anything, why are we doing this for a third time? But besides that, then when you go to use their elevators, you have to tell them what floor you want to go to. And when you get in the elevator, there's no controls, so that the highway patrol can shut an elevator wherever they want to shut it. Weird staircase formats. Nothing does what you would logically think it would do. And do you know what the reason for it is? You'll get told by anybody you ask. It's for your safety. Well, wait, if California is so safe that I don't need my Second Amendment rights, then why do you have a military force, which is basically what you've done, put in a building with security that you would expect to see at Fort Knox?
Rick, you're a regular guy. You're a regular middle-class guy, you and your wife. I know, because we're friends.
Right.
Rick and I are wine tasting buddies, he and his wife, and my wife and I, and we're wine buddies. I'm a regular middle-class guy. You ever get death threats, brother?
Yeah.
Yeah, me too. Why? Because we have an opinion that's unpopular. We're not afraid to speak out and voice it. Look, I live in San Diego County, okay? And like any other city, San Diego has good neighborhoods and bad neighborhoods. Hmm. And you live in Orange County area, LA area. Right. And like any other city, LA, Orange County has good areas and bad areas.
I speak
I
up
can
and down
tell
the
you
state.
that in just talking about rough areas, high crime areas, and by the way, those high crime areas are spilling over into areas, that crime is spilling over into areas in California that didn't used to be high crime. Has anybody noticed the snatch and grabs that are happening in Beverly Hills?
Right.
Oh, yeah, California's so safe. Has anybody bothered to look at what's happening with San Francisco? The city that our wonderful mayor or Governor Gavin Newsom used to be the mayor of. He destroyed that, and he's been actively destroying California ever since he's become governor. Look, the people who live in high crime areas are like every other Californian. They're hardworking, good people trying to raise their families and live their lives. Obviously, there are criminals there. There are criminals everywhere. But to say that California is safe, why are you bothered, is to live in such a bubble without a clue as to what's happening on the actual streets of this state that it boggles the mind. I'm just kind of astounded. And it's only because they are protected everywhere they go. So anyway, I'm beating a dead horse here, but I think it's important. It's important to say these people do not. If you're a Californian, I'm going to tell you right now: stop voting for these people. They do not care about you.
Amen.
Stop voting for Gavin Newsom because if you like good-looking men, stop voting for Gavin Newsom because he's pleasant to look at. He does not give a rat's tootie about you. He only cares about being president of the United States and advancing his power. He does not care about you. And none of those legislators up there who are actively, consistently trying to regulate you into oblivion and take away your rights care about you. So let's stop electing them, shall we? So that's my first little rant right here. Look, I look at this. We've got a bunch of stuff we can do with this decision. I mean, because it just kind of gives us a whole bunch of tools in our toolbox we didn't have before. But we have to prioritize these things, don't we? So what would you say, what is CRPA looking at as step one?
Well, step one was already, as I said, launched. That was going after all the sheriff's departments and demanding they come in compliance. And in that step, one of the things I want to let everyone know that we did was we also, since we're using the fun military terms today, we took a couple shots across their bow already saying, and oh, by the way, anything you do to make it harder for people to exercise their right, like raising the fees to make it so they can't afford it, requiring multiple steps, multiple processes to enjoy that right, you're going to get sued. Not you may, not one day, we will immediately do that. And so we've given them a time period because we realize government can't turn something overnight, as you well know, but we're looking. And so, even today we've already made some phone calls to a couple of different departments to put out statements of we're not going to comply. And so we've already said, you really need to reconsider that because here it comes. And if they don't, then we're going to follow the suit. And so that's round one. Round two, obviously, is, the roster and some of the other issues that have been out there. We now have the right to go after that because limiting common use things, you can't do that. This case was very clear on that. And we're looking at a lot of other issues. We're even looking at the 16 laws this morning that the governor's proposing and getting ready to go after any one of them he signs based on what came out of this Bruen case. So that I think is kind of the totality of the first month of the battleground coming out of Midway. But like I said, first month, because we've all talked at CRPA and being upfront, a lot of the other groups, Second Amendment Foundation, Gun Owners of America and stuff, there have been a lot of conversations over the past year waiting to see what was going to happen on this, that there are going to be waves of counterattacks now from us. And, we have to get each wave. We can't do everything at once. There's not enough of us, but we can do first things first. So, when everybody talked, one of the first things we said was, Joel's right. The lady that lives in Compton's right. The lady that lives up in the East Bay's right. The guy that's living in, as a farm worker in the Central Valley, the elderly couple that moved up to Modoc because that was an affordable place for them to live, but they live, miles away from law enforcement. Every one of those people have the right to carry. Every one of those people should have an equal right, equal access, equal process, equal everything to exercise their Second Amendment right. And that was priority one, was to make sure that they do. And then priority two then is to open up, like I said, all the different areas that have been closed down. And we've looked at several things that I will talk about in later shows as we file them. But I think people are going to be amazed at everything that's going to come out of the woodwork now that we've just been waiting for this case. And I know Chuck said it on your show a couple months back.
A lot.
This,
right.
We have been locked and loaded and waiting for the guy on the range to say fire. And that came down yesterday. And so now,
and that's so important to recognize too, because I've gotten a couple of emails this morning. I've had 2 phone calls and a few, I think 1 text, asking me about this because they were concerned that it looked like California was just sitting back ready to go if this decision went the way that they didn't like. And I think what it's important to recognize is that, everybody's been getting all geared up for this so that the moment this decision dropped, if it dropped the way we were hoping it was going to, and on this show many, many times, Sam has talked about it, you've talked about it, Chuck has talked about it, Steve Hallbrook has talked about it, even, Cam Edwards and I were talking about it on this show. This is what we were hoping for. Everybody has gotten geared up for this, and that's why there's all this stuff is already prepped and pretty much ready to go. I think it's important. Chuck said this one day, and I know it's kind of an old saying, but I think it applies here. And this is where it's important not to stop fighting. Mm-hmm. Chuck said that if this decision goes the way we want, which arguably it did, that it's not the beginning of the end, it's the end of the beginning. It's the big battle we needed to win in order to actually fight the remainder of the war. It's like you said, this is our midway. It's not the end.
No.
So it's important that we support gun owners of California. It's important that we support California Rifle and Pistol Association. It's important that we support gun owners of America. Pick an organization you like. Now, I'm going to tell you, just between you and me and the Fence Post, the organization that files the most lawsuits in California is the one this gentleman represents. And so you should support the California Rifle and Pistol Association. And I urge you to do that even if you're in another state. This is the end of yesterday was the end of the beginning. Now we've got to get down, we got to force the governments in these various states, particularly the 6 that are, or 8 or however many there are that are incredibly restrictive. We've got to stuff this decision down their throats, and we're going to have to do that in court. Mm-hmm. And as a result, unless I miss my guess, court cases cost a lot of dough.
Right. Well, there's two areas I want to say, like, so Chuck would be clapping right now, hearing everything you're saying, because that's true.
Chuck's my friend. He'll be nice to me, so I'm grateful.
But I also look at this as an island hopping campaign. That's why I went with the war in the Pacific kind of metaphor, because Midway was critical for America, for Americans to realize we can beat the opposition. They were pretty downhearted after Japan and Pearl Harbor for rightful reasons. And for rightful reasons, many in California have been like, I'm out of here, it's over, we've lost, and had very similar emotions to people at the time, and America did. Now we had our Midway. Now the tide has turned. And that took Americans supporting the people on the front lines as we went island by island by island to defeat the enemy and win the war. That's what this is going to take. And it's not just those that's in court. That's why you're going to hear me constantly talking about, in the public model, we need all of you to not accept terms. Get rid of political correctness. When someone says something that is stupid, is wrong, is illegal, is meant to demean us, make us look like something we're not. Yesterday, Ron Perlman, I don't know if you saw the tweet, but he basically tweeted out like, hey, this was all for the white man. And I immediately responded, written by a black justice. This had nothing to do with the white man. It had to do with all Americans. The Second Amendment, as I say all the time when I speak up and down the state, is not a Republican thing. It's an American thing and quit allowing people to cut the population down to say, I mean, there's people today that are very upset, as you said, on Roe v. Wade. But guess what? On both sides of that decision, there are gun people. It's not like, oh, you can't have a difference of any other opinion and not be a Second Amendment. No, we span a great cross spectrum of America, and it's now time to coalesce that. And like you said, fight in every state, push back, do it, and don't do it in a way of, trying to make it look like, oh yeah, we're all get tanks now, because that just feeds the opposition. Don't feed them, take away everything from them. And how we do that is by constantly pushing back and saying, no, we've always been nice people in society. We've always been the polite people society. We've always been the law-abiding society. And so now you have to treat us that way. And we're not going to accept anything less.
So you mentioned a lot of the things that probably you can talk about. Are there lawsuits coming down the pike that CRPA is ready to file that you can't be specific about, but we can at least kind of sit back and go, gee, when I see those, I'm going to say yay. Is there something surprising coming at some point?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things I can say to that, and there's a couple of things I can kind of highlight. So one, yes, there are literally, when I was doing this, I wasn't being funny. There's like this many, and my fingers are moving, so it's more than just 10 lawsuits that are queued up and are ready to go. And Chuck and the team have a logical order that they're going to come out. And I'm sure Chuck will come on the show just as they're doing it. And if not, he'll send me or Tiffany to come on the show and tell you everything about those. There's also another angle, and everybody looks at the legal angle, but there's the legislative angle. And so legislatively, there has been an attitude, not just in this state, but in many states, of defense, not a real strong offense. CRPA started about 6 years ago. Roy Griffith, myself, Sam, and a couple other people got together, and we started pushing back, doing some things that were very much Trojan horsed. So it didn't really have our names on to get it across. And we've talked about a couple of those on previous shows. That all started changing yesterday. I've had several conversations with Republicans and a couple of Democrats who are like, are you guys going to be ready to go in 23? And we said yes. And so we've got several pieces of legislation that we're writing very tightly. And we have this attitude. Yeah, I'm not going to promise you that any of them are going to get out year one, but they're going to get out because we're going to shove them right down their throat every year. And people are like, well, why would you do that? And this is what people don't understand. This is where my office and Chuck's office dovetail beautifully together. When I push a bill, we're just going to call it Bill 1. I push Bill 1 and it gets defeated, say, May of next year. And then I do it the next year and it makes it to June. Well, after I've done that twice, every other time I do it, that strengthens the case that Chuck and his people will launch. Because the first thing the judge will say is, well, do you even have a right to, did you try to fix this legislation? And it's like, yeah, Rick and company did this, and they did this, and they did this, and this is what it got met with the state. We tried to go that way. That's why we're now coming to the court. And then the court looks at the legislature and goes, you guys are idiots. And so this is why I get frustrated sometimes when we've talked about legislative issues and people, in the chats and stuff are like, well, what's the point? That is the point. That is the point, that even if we lose the bill in the legislature, we're setting up the win for the courtroom.
Well, I want to jump in there too and say that, elections matter. Mm-hmm. And Californians, I know, I are one. I still pay my taxes in California, and I still vote in California. Don't ask me why, but I do. I do have actually I have a reason, and I do, and there is a reason for that, and I'm kind of stuck. So, but that's okay. Elections matter even in states where you don't think you can win. If you think about, first of all, a very simple thing, whether you liked him or not as president, we got the victory we got yesterday because of Donald J. Trump and his having appointed 3 justices who were all on the correct side of this decision. Had he not done so, had we had a different president at that time, we probably would not have had the victory we had yesterday. So kudos to Donald Trump. Again, whether you liked him or not, he still deserves credit for this, among other things, I suspect. Additionally, elections matter even here in California. The good citizens of San Francisco, one of the arguably more left-leaning places in the entire country, probably the most left-leaning place in the entire country, just took a soft on crime, whack job, regressive nutcase DA that was put in place by George Soros's money and threw him out of office. And people say elections can't happen and you can't win in California. By the way, that's about to happen, I think, to the same version of a DA in Los Angeles. This is an amazing thing, to be honest with you. So even in California, votes count. It's important to recognize that elections count. So I urge you, even if you think your vote means nothing in the state, it doesn't. It's important to vote. You would be amazed if you knew just how many gun owners there are in the state of California. And as Rick said, they span every demographic that you can imagine. If we all voted so that we could defend our right to keep and bear arms, honestly, we'd win pretty much every time. But we don't. So it's important that we do that, and I urge you to do so. And any comments you want to make about that, Rick, please do, because you know more about the statistics than I do.
Well, the statistics are we have just under 10 million gun owners in California, which implies they're over the age of 21, and therefore voting should not be an issue for them because they're not felons, so they wouldn't have had those rights stripped. Yet we don't see those votes coming out, because if we did, it means we could paint this state whatever color we wanted, voting as a block. And I also want to highlight, one of the coolest parts of my job is, just to set the record straight, no, I don't get to go to the range every day and shoot a firearm. And usually when I go to the range, like I did this last week, that was to help legislators and their staff shoot shotguns. I never got to fire a shotgun myself at that 5-hour event because I'm not there to do that. I also get to work with people from across that spectrum community. And one of them that I got to work with runs one of the groups that is based with African Americans and goes out into the Black community to make sure that they have what they need. And what's interesting is he works for a university. I won't say the one he works for, but he works at a university. And he was sharing with me that on the back of his car, he has a Trump sticker and an NRA sticker. And he said the car got parked outside of his office and people called campus police saying, oh no, we feel this individual's life may be in danger because there's a Trump NRA car parked outside of his office. And he had to tell campus security, no, it's okay, it's mine. And I think this just goes to show the community, because he said some of the students that called are 2A students. But they even thought and this is he was like, why do they think a Black man working at educational can't be conservative and can't want to have a firearm? And he said, no, by the way, two of the people I work with, they're as Black as I am, are not conservative and they have firearms. And I think that's one of the things that this case is helping to defend people of color, people of economic disadvantage, as much as it is as people in the middle like you and I, and people that have more. There's people of all colors, all backgrounds at every level economically of our society, and they're all gun owners. And what this case really sets the bar at is no more playing games to disenfranchise those people, no more playing games to limit who does and who doesn't have it so you can make a fallacious argument. And there's three wonderful quotes that came out of Justice Alito, who has a fairly important role at the Supreme Court, one might argue. And I loved these three, and I wanted to share them with everybody. A lot of the people right now are saying, how could the court possibly have said this, given what happened at Uvalde, given what happened, back in New York and other areas? And he says, and he's obviously in his role understands everything that's going on. He says, and while the dissent seemingly thinks that the ubiquity of guns and our country's high level of gun violence provides reasons for sustaining this New York law, the dissent appears not to understand that it's these very facts that cause law-abiding citizens to feel the need to carry guns for self-defense, which was Justice Alito saying, look, the government and law enforcement can't protect you. These horrific acts of violence are the very reason the Second Amendment is there to provide for you and I to be able to defend ourselves. He goes on because there was a period where, the idea of how to get a permit or not get a permit. He said the Solicitor General was asked whether such a person would be issued a carry permit if she pleaded, quote, there have been a lot of muggings in this area and I'm scared to death. The solicitor's candid answer was, in general, no. He goes, to get a permit, the applicant would have to show more. For example, that she had been singled out for the attack. And he said, a law that dictates that violates the Second Amendment, period. So that's one of the things you're going to see in California and other states, that this is what shall issue means. It means you can't do this. Well, maybe you get it, Joel, because you have a security company. Maybe you get it, Rick, because you travel to places where people want to kill you. Oh, but your wife? No. Or this person? No.
Maybe I can get it because I can afford to pay the fee.
Right. It eliminates that. And then he said, today, unfortunately, many Americans have good reason to fear that they will be victimized if they're unable to protect themselves. And today, no less than 1791, the Second Amendment guarantees their right to do so. That should be the bumper sticker, the T-shirt slogan, everything with Justice Alito's name under it, so that everybody in the public square realizes that, yes, bad things happen, but that's why, 200 plus years ago, this right was given to us. And I would like to remind people that the founding fathers, when they wrote this right, said this right was granted to us by the Creator.
Yeah, I wanted to just say this right was not given to us in 1791.
Right.
This right, according to our founders, and I agree, is a right that predated the enumeration of it. Enumeration just means listing, if you want to, it's just a fancy word for writing something down in a list. It predated the fact that it was codified into law, and all the Second Amendment was meant to do, and now is beginning to do, because the Supreme Court just put a lot of teeth back in it, is to defend that right, that natural right, if you want to call it that, that God-given right, if you want to call it that right to self-defense and self-existence and defending your own existence and the existence of those you love. It was meant to keep the government from taking that from you. Rich people, look, I don't have a problem with rich people. If you're successful and you've done well in your life, good for you. Rich people and politicians will always have security around them, and they don't need to carry a gun because they have guns around them carried by others. Uh-huh. It's the regular folks, me, you, Rick, and certainly folks in lower socioeconomic areas where they just don't make a lot of money, and they have to depend upon the police. Look, you brought up Uvalde. I'm not picking on law enforcement there. I wasn't there. I'm not going to Monday morning quarterback their decision. But I think one thing that is very clear about that we've seen not only there but in other like shootings, is that if we cede our defense to others, to government agents, they may possibly do it right. They may also quite possibly do it wrong. And that's what happened in Uvalde, it seems to me, and that's what happened in other shootings, where in one, where the school resource officer stood outside the door for a very long time and did absolutely nothing. And this happens. We've then given the defense of our lives and the lives of those whom we love to someone else who doesn't know us and who is not. The other thing I think people have to understand, well, the cops should have gone in. Look, cops are people too, and they can be afraid just like everybody else, and being a police officer is not a suicide mission. So sometimes they won't because it's not safe for them to do so, which means it's certainly not safe for you to be in there being shot. So we can't give our defense and the authority to defend us to others. They're not going to be there sometimes. On odd occasions, they will be. But the old saying that when you need a gun, that when you need a cop, they're minutes away, and I don't know how they say it, but the gun I got with me, I can draw in under a second and a half. Okay, the cop's going to take 11 minutes to show up. So, which one would you rather have with you at the time? I think this is just common sense. Unfortunately, common sense is not all too common. It should be called something else. What else should we talk about if we have not? Have we covered everything? Is there anything we should chat about that we haven't?
In these initial stages, we've covered everything that I can at least talk about on this. The last thing I would encourage everybody out there is do not let anyone steal this victory from you. We have won. We're moving forward. This is not going to all happen overnight. There's going to be some jurisdictions we're going to have to fight harder and longer than others. There's obviously, as you said, Joel, a great deal of money that was put into sheriff's races. We had a couple of departments that got flipped with very progressive candidates that are about to get met with the full force of the CRPA because we're not going to allow them to do what they campaigned they wanted to do. And this empowers us to do so. So this is a gift that's incredible. So for those,
this is a gift that we'll keep on giving for a very long time. Yeah.
And this is an area where, we got brothers and sisters in counties like Contra Costa and Santa Barbara and San Francisco, Marin and others that I could name off. That you may be feeling like, well, where is CRPA and where are these other groups for us? We're coming. We know you're there. This is going to be a rescue mission like never seen before. We're able to do things that we weren't able to do just 48 hours ago. And so, no, you're not going to be able to go apply tomorrow morning or on Monday morning, but it's going to happen now because now we have the tool that we needed to push back. We have the legal right from the highest court in the land to push back. And so the pushback has already started. As I said, we've already launched the initial volley, and this is going to probably go back and forth during the summer, but you're going to see things open up. And, every time it does, I'm going to send you a message that this opened up and this opened up, Joel. So, you can get that word out there.
We'll be right here. We'll be all over it. I mean, I want to encourage you, as Rick is trying to encourage you. It's tough right now. Hang in there. Stay with the fight because the cavalry is coming.
And by the way,
cavalry is very well armed now, and the cavalry is coming. And have no doubt that that's going to happen. And the cavalry is already trained, ready to go, suited up, horses fed and cleaned up and wiped down, ready to run. It's coming.
And be committed to exercise that right. That's the other thing I'm going to tell you is for all the people that I have heard in LA County as examples say, hey, I want a CCW. It was literally tens of thousands. And yet when we first got that door to crack, it was like trying to push a penguin off an iceberg to see if there was anything in the water. Nobody wanted to jump. We need people that when we break these things open to exercise them, because the first thing the opposition will say is, see, you guys are a minority because nobody really wanted that. And what we got to do is get people to go get this. And, for those of you that have complained to me, well, it shouldn't cost me a couple $100 to do it. You spend more than that for a privilege called a driver's license and insurance. So, yeah, I wish there wasn't fees, but someone's got to pay the fees for the permit. We're going to fight that too, but we're taking the first step, which is making sure everybody has a right to get it and have it. And I hope to see a day where California don't have to carry anything, just your driver's license and who you are and the fact that you're not a criminal is enough. But this was a big step in turning that around from may issue to shall issue, and hopefully one day we'll have open carry in the state.
Well, and I would just close by reminding, by this reminder, and that is that I remember when concealed carry in the United States was extraordinarily rare. Mm-hmm. I think it was only Vermont. Yeah. In fact, we used to call it Vermont carry because it was the only place you could do it. And then, you could get a permit I mean, you could get a permit if you were extremely wealthy, you were a movie star, or you were a politician or a retired cop, maybe. And back then, retired cop was maybe. That was before the Leosa law. H.R. 218 was signed into law by George W. Bush after 9/11. So this has been an incredibly long, arduous battle. It started out on the east end of the country with Marion Hammer, I think was her name, from NRA, who fought very hard to get a concealed carry law passed through Florida. And it very slowly moved across the country until you had, instead of all these may issue laws, you had a number of states that were shall issue. And then after that came constitutional carry, and that has been working its way across the country and replacing shall issue. My second home state of Arizona is a constitutional carry state. California most certainly is not. But that's the progression they've gone through. No issue, from no issue to may issue to shall issue to constitutional carry. Well, the United States Supreme Court, which Justice Thomas has been wanting to do this for about 30 years, and he finally got to do it. I think maybe it was a great birthday present for him as well. They have just turned the entire country into, at minimum, at the worst, shall issue. The constitutional carry states are not going to go back to shall issue. So now we have just taken these last few states that would not change, and they're having themselves kicking and screaming dragged into compliance with the Constitution. The next step is to drag them kicking and screaming into full compliance with it as a constitutional carry state. But it's going to take time in court battles. So hang in there, keep up the fight, don't give up. And like I said, don't forget, the cavalry is coming, even in places like California. Last word, Rick. It's all yours.
Be safe, shoot straight, and keep fighting back for your rights.
Ooh, I like that one. Thank you very much for coming on the show, my friend. Have a great day.
You too.
Thank you very much for watching the interview all the way through. I really do appreciate it. Hope it was informative. I will have some other interviews. Chuck Michelle and I are kind of going back and forth with schedule right now, trying to figure out when he and Steve Holbrook can come on. Two constitutional attorneys that are, in my humble opinion, rather brilliant. And they'll talk with us about, specifically from the legal perspective, how this case and this decision gives us such an incredible lift in our shoe and really does put teeth back in the Second Amendment where they belong. And they put all the teeth back in. They didn't leave a single molar out. So I'm very encouraged by that. And then I'm also working back and forth with schedule with Cam Edwards to get Cam from Cam and Company come back on, and we can talk about it from his perspective as a journalist and as a promoter of the Second Amendment, what he sees around the country and how this decision will affect us everywhere else instead of just in California. So look for those. Those will be coming soon. Again, thank you very much for all of your support. If you'd like to support GunGuyTV, you can do that by joining GunGuyTV crew, and you can do that either on Locals, which I would prefer that you do because Locals supports your rights, and it's actually kind of part and parcel of Rumble. And you can just go to GunGuyTVcrew.com to do that. Or if you're already on Patreon and you prefer that platform, that's fine. If you're supporting other creators there and you would like to support GunGuyTV, you can join GunGuyTV crew on Patreon as well, and there is a link in the description. Have a great week, and I should briefly mention that right on the heels of the 2A case being announced today, obviously the Supreme Court overturned Roe versus Wade, and there have been a lot of threats of protests, some of which have been threats of violent and destructive protests. So this weekend, I do urge you to be very careful and take care of yourself, and if you can, not go to places where these things are happening. That would be my advice. And no matter what you do, wherever you go, whatever you do, stay safe.